Hi there and welcome back to this almost forgotten channel. I am very happy to be back. I have been extremely busy in between my first video and this video, but I am back, and if you have been looking forward to the murder videos that I plan on doing, you will be especially happy to hear that I will be going from one video on this channel to at least 31 more, because for the spooky season I felt it would be the perfect time to get back into this YouTube channel, and by doing so, by doing 31 horror murder videos. You can tell I practiced this intro. But yes, I would like to do 31 murder-esque videos this month. They won't be as long as my original, they will be probably shorter, but they will all be true, researched, and hopefully with an element of additional spook, because let's face it, any murder is horrific and scary in itself. But I thought I would start spooky season with the perfect video, and that is a obviously true story about the only time a ghost has had testimony allowed in court. And that is the story of the Greenbrier Ghost. In 1876 in West Virginia, America, a woman called Zona Hester was born. There isn't much known about her life besides when she was born, but it was well acknowledged that she was living a pure and happy, non-criminal life. When she was 22, she had a baby out of wedlock, and there is no information about who the father was, where he went, what he did. There's nothing. The next year, a drifter came into town by the name of Edward Shrew. He was also known as Trout. He was about 35 years old, and Zona took an instant liking to him. Within a month they were married and living in their own home, even though it was against the mother's wishes, who had quite openly taken a disliking to him. For the next 3 months there was no real issues. They seemed happy, they got on well. There was a neighbourhood boy called Andy Jones who was about 11, and he would come round now and again and help out with chores, and nothing seemed out of place. Until January 23rd, 1897, which was a Saturday. Edward was in work in what was now the blacksmith shop down the road, which is actually how Zona and Edward met. And Edward said to Andy to go back to the house and ask Zona if there was anything she needed from the store. Andy Jones did just that, but when he got to the house, he was greeted by a Zona that was lying on the floor, dead. She was found with her feet together and one hand on her stomach and the other hand down by her side, with no signs of life. Edward instantly drew attention to himself, because at the time it was customary that women would prepare other women, at least. I actually don't know if it was just the dead or just the deceased women, but Zona's body should have been prepared by women, and Edward was adamant and grief-stricken and refused for anyone to touch her except himself. He dressed her up and he put her in what he claimed was her favourite dress that had a long and stiff neckline. And when anyone went near the body, he would just go into a fit of grief and hug her and cry and not let go, especially the head. Even during the autopsy, he refused to leave her side and would constantly sit there cradling her head. As there seemed to be no physical damage that was easy to be noticed, the doctor didn't want to upset Edward too much and just put it down as what was called then everlasting faint, or a heart attack. It was later changed to childbirth, which is unknown why, because there was no documentation that she was pregnant, but at least for the 2 weeks before, she had been seeing the same doctor for women's troubles. So that could have been in relation or not, we're not sure, but that's what it was changed to. When the mother, Mary Jane, found out about the death of her daughter, the first word she said was, "The devil has killed her." The next day, Sunday the 24th of January 1897, was the wake, and the body was put into an unfinished coffin and taken to the mother's house. The entire journey, Edward held a candle behind her head and, once again, would not let anyone get too close. When the body was prepared at the mother's house, he put a pillow on one side of her head and a cloth rolled up on the other side, claiming it would allow her to rest easier. He then also got her favourite shawl and wrapped it around her neck. People actually acknowledged that Edward had been behaving suspiciously. He would go through bouts of absolute grief to almost this manic energy throughout, and this continued throughout the funeral too, which was the next day on Monday. Once again, throughout the funeral, Edward would not let anyone get too close to the body, but one or two people had noticed and commented on the odd looseness of her neck. On the funeral as well, Mary Jane, the mother, took a piece of cloth or the rolled up material that was supporting her neck and took it with her, claiming she wanted a piece of her daughter during the funeral. After the funeral, she offered it back to Edward, but he refused to take it. She took it home and noticed there was a funny smell on the cloth, so she went to wash it. She commented that when the cloth went into the water, this red liquid oozed out of the cloth and made the water completely red and staining the cloth pink. She boiled the cloth again and tried to hang it out, but the stains never went away, and she feared or claimed or suspected that it was blood. That night, Mary Jane claims that she was visited by the ghost of her daughter. As she lay in bed, she described the experience as first a ball of light that then formed into her daughter. She stood over the bed and said that her husband, Edward, had beaten her throughout the entire marriage, and on the night of her death had broken her neck because she hadn't prepared an adequate meal that had meat in it. The daughter went to prove that her neck was broken by turning her head 180 degrees, and then while walking away from her mother was still staring at her. She then returned and visited her mother for 3 more nights to make sure that she did something about her murderous husband. Mary Jane then went to the local prosecutor, John Alfred Preston. He sat there for a couple of hours and listened to everything she said, and then, amazingly, reopened the case. Considering this could have easily been the ramblings of a grief-stricken mother, it is interesting that he did reopen it. However, some sources claim that newspapers or local people had already been speculating that there could have been foul play. I say that it could have been in newspapers. I haven't actually found a source dating when these suspicions started, which is unusual because newspapers are dated. When the prosecutor discovered what happened during the first autopsy, he was adamant that another should happen. This time they got the doctor to exhume the body, and with 5 other witnesses performed a second autopsy. Even though this happened on February 22nd of the same year, the body was still perfectly preserved because of the weather conditions. Edward was predictably very against this. He complained the whole time and said he didn't want anything to do with it if it had to happen. The prosecutor told him that he could be there or be forced to be there. The autopsy took 3 hours, and when the doctor inserted the knife at the back of the neck to remove the brain, he then realised instantly what was the cause of death. He stood up and turned to Edward and said, "It appears your wife's neck is broken." It is also documented by multiple witnesses in that room that Edward lowered his head and whispered, "You can't prove I did it." The neck was broken and the windpipe was smashed. There were fingerprints on the neck to indicate that she was choked, and her neck was dislocated between the first and the second vertebrae. Edward Shue was then arrested on the suspicion of her murder. Now, even though this was pretty incriminating, at the end of the day, the only person to say Edward was the murderer was a ghost. But during the trial, some damning evidence did come up. It was discovered that Edward had already been married twice. His longest marriage was his first, to a woman called Ellen, and they even had a baby together. However, she is the one who actually filed for divorce in that marriage, claiming that Edward was abusive. Edward got married to a woman named Lucy about a year later, and a year into their marriage, she died. He claimed that she tripped over and hit her head on a rock, but the entire town grew suspicious of Edward, and he left town. 2 years later, he met and married Zona, and 3 months later, she was dead. Once again, it's all damning, but still circumstantial evidence, but there was also evidence of, or history of, him being arrested for stealing horses. So you can at least say without a doubt he wasn't completely above breaking the law. Okay, stealing horses and murder is different, but it's still breaking the law. The prosecution did not want Mary Jane mentioning anything about ghosts in the court. They worried that she would appear insane and no one would take her testimony seriously. However, as soon as the defense knew about this, they immediately asked her. The prosecution told her to say that it was just the visions of a grief-stricken mother, but Mary Jane did not falter in her testimony. She was adamant that that was her daughter and it was who visited her. She was adamant that her daughter visited her and not as a dreamlike state, but as a ghost. Defense probably thought that they had won the case just from this alone, but it actually backfired and the jury believed her. Edward Shue was found guilty. 10 of the 12 people on the jury wanted to see him hung, but because it was not unanimous, he was then sentenced to prison for life. That was not enough for some people, and as much as 30 people actually formed a mob, bought brand new rope and tried to hang Edward themselves. But the plan was foiled as someone had warned the prosecutor about this happening, and they hid Edward Shue away until they could take him to West Virginia Penitentiary, where he died only 3 years later from suspected measles which had gone through the prison. It was recorded that he died on March 13th, 1900, but the graveyard that he was buried in didn't keep records any earlier than 1930, so it is completely unknown where he is buried and what happened to him. So that is the story, the true story, of how a ghost was able to give testimony in court. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I was fascinated learning about this and I hope you were fascinated hearing about it. If there are any particular stories that you would like to hear, I haven't planned all 31 videos out yet, so please comment below and I could add them to my list. Otherwise, just stick around because there'll be more videos and I hope you enjoy them all. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and comment and subscribe because it all helps out the channel, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye bye.